So I go home to New York, and at 6'4", 240, I go to my parents' house where I had my twin bed that I grew up in. And I lay on that bed, and the next 2.5 years, I lay horizontal, staring at the ceiling for 99% of the time. I'll tell you what the other 1% was, but 99% of the time, I don't watch TV. I don't listen to the radio. I'm barely answering my friends' text messages other than just to say that I'm alive, because there is zero processing going on in my brain. I literally wake up just staring at the ceiling, looking at paint chips, and that's it, like a vegetable.
Hey, this is Larry the Cable Guy, and you are listening to the Dark Side of Elite. And if you ain't listening to it, you're a communist. Let's get it done.
Hey, it's Commander Jack Riggins, retired Navy SEAL commander and host of the Dark Side of Elite podcast. If you like what's going on in this circus, I want you to join my crew. Become part of our ship. Go to www.thedarksideofelite.com and subscribe and join the crew. There's 3 levels. You get behind the scenes access and exclusive content. I can guarantee you're going to be in for a hell of a ride.
Welcome to the Dark Side of Elite podcast.
I've been on this mission for a long time, dealing with my own demons, and SEAL team was a great deal for me, like not only as a profession, but kind of took some of my energies, and I went in doing real good and then just kind of backtracked with a lot of mental health and addiction, and then battled through that. So obviously in that type of job, you're able to help a lot of people. And one of the things I took away after 20 years was, I feel confident about this. Like, I was always there for someone, whether it was physical injuries due to combat or training or mental health or addiction, and guide them and get them in the right places. And then when it came to me, me personally, even though I had a history, I was a complete fucking disaster. And so I could help others, but I couldn't help myself. And anyway, it kind of crescendoed, if you will, with, kind of a drunk addict, pills, for lack of a better term, suicide attempt on my wife's birthday in Croatia with all my little kids there. And I was just triggered over something that had happened in the war. And that's pretty common. I mean, they call it sometimes survivor guilt. But anyway, so, she just kind of set me straight. That kind of woke me back up, because like I said, I have this like family history and all this. And anyway, so I finally reached out for help, and and been doing really good. So when I got out of the military, and even in the military, and I told people, like, some people don't get it, and I'm so proud to have served and be in that unit, and there were a lot of great things, but like, my mission is just to educate others now, one person at a time. Like, I don't even care who listens. Right. And I do a lot of sports consulting, so it's a good mix with kids that are,
nice.
That are athletic. And I used to be in sports, and I know you've been around it. And then, most of them aren't going to go on and get paid. And so they've got all these choices. And so it's been passionate. I just spread the message because I'm like, I get it. If I'm, a former SEAL or whatever, I have a platform, and that's true, but you can abuse that. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to talk real about my successes and failures. And if other people want to, great. If they don't, I know that, just by process of talking about it, especially in a male-dominated culture and even in SEAL team, males have a really hard time of addressing those things. And it's kind of sad. My experience has been most good people hold on too late, and then, they ruin a lot of stuff. So Scotty got me out on the airwaves, and he didn't know anything about me, and he thought it was pretty amazing. And I was like, it's just my life, man. And he was like, well, how are you doing this? And I told him how I was, just helping out sports teams. And he's like, well, you can have a bigger platform. And I was like, okay. So
sign me up.
Yeah. So that's what the Dark Side of Elite is about, as a pod platform and all that. And really thankful you came on. Because, of course, guys. I wouldn't have I'm impressed, obviously, want to know your story and your platforms, because I'm sure it's similar. I just see what you're doing, and it's a similar mission. And I think it's so important in today's world. And not just, I say males because I'm a male and I came from a male-dominated culture, but I work with a lot of females, and a lot of this stuff is indiscriminate, is what I call it. Like, it doesn't matter
Well,
what
also,
the title is.
women have a tendency to perseverate and obsess a little bit more also sometimes. So even though they speak things out, that winded yarn in their head continues to get tangled, and so however stress and trauma builds, whether it's from a acute situation that you're viewing or something that you're thinking about over and over and over again, your body still processes it in a similar way. So, yeah, you know, with women, it might not manifest exactly the same way, but they're still going through their own shit.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a human thing. And we've got on our sports consulting, business consulting, we have a high performance psychiatrist. He's good at what he does. So we've learned a lot about what would maybe, well, I don't want to say stigmas, but he knows, he's worked a lot with female teams and male teams, but I would say, like, as far as like clicking in quick, it's with females. And it's amazing when he breaks it down of how, like, the obsessive compulsive, especially with gymnasts and certain athletes, swimmers, like, you can't see it, but it's there. And then, you know, it manifests itself. And he's done a lot of great work and helped a lot of females and males. So it's pretty interesting. But yeah,
I think with athletes, you know, it's funny. Like we have this guy Robin Lerner we work with, the goalie from Islanders and the Blackhawks. Now he's with the Golden Knights. And you know, someone on stage at an event that we had asked him, "Do you think other players deal with this?" It was almost like the most softball question you could ask someone. And he goes, "Oh, you mean the guy whose locker is next to mine, who's tapping his stick 7 times in the corner of his locker before he comes out on the ice every time? That thing that coaches call a routine, that's actually OCD." Yeah, other people deal with it, you know? But that, like, athletes, there's a perfectionist attitude that athletes have that I think comes part and parcel with, you know, playing on the field, on the ice, on the court, that has a positive side to it and also has, you know, a dark side to it, no pun intended. And I think our, you know, even when I was managing sports teams, like on the sales side of things, I used to tell my reps before I knew anything about mental health that our greatest strength is also our greatest weakness. Like, whatever we're really good at also can get us into a lot of trouble based on how good we are at it when we use it the wrong way. So it's fascinating how the mind works in that respect, and how do you harness the power of what you have that's a trait of yours and really help grow the good side of it and figure out a way to calm down the negative side of it. That's a training in and of itself that takes a long time.
Yeah, without a doubt. And just to be even aware of what you just said, because I think a lot of young people, all of us, I mean, we're just young, so we don't have the experience, but you see those isms, as I call them, as positives. They may be reinforced by parents, coaches, teachers. And I mean, it can be piano player. I mean, it doesn't matter. I want to be a doctor. And then all of a sudden, you know, I always say it's a razor's edge, or pilot speak in the military, you know, pushing the edge of the envelope. And then all of a sudden it just goes a little off kilter and you're like, oh my God. And I just thought, and still think, right, that with education and understanding of that dynamic and more people from any background discussing it, well, then you're already better prepared to combat it because you understand it. And yeah, so that's cool. So how did you get into this? I mean, you started kind of in sports management, kind of, that was your track, correct?
Yeah. So
was that a goal for, like, as a young guy, like, this is what I'm going to go do?
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I knew at a young age. I mean, I was an athlete growing up. I played 4 sports in 3 seasons only because pathetically I was the kicker on the football team as I played soccer goalie. But yeah, I went to Cornell University and I started internships. I have some hilarious stories about how I got my internships, because before the days of the internet. So, you know, I was buying those books in the bookstore where they were telling you places to apply. So, like, here's a good one. I applied to IMG, International Management Group, and it said to send your resume to this guy, Mark McCormick, CEO. Well, in college, you know, like, I'm not thinking what a CEO is, and I have no idea who Mark McCormick is. I just know I've heard what IMG is. So I send my resume, and I get a call to go interview in their New York offices in New York City. And they I guess purchased a brownstone, and so they had 4 floors in this beautiful brownstone building. First mistake I made was I'm interviewing, and it's starting to get closer to the end of the year, so it's starting to get hot, end of the school year. And I wear a blue shirt for my from under my suit, and I look down and I'm dripping sweat, and I'm like holding my jacket open so that the air can fly by and dry my shirt off. So I get into the office like partially still drenched, and I sit down. And these 2 women in the HR department, they're just in front of me. And they're like, "So how do you know Mark?" And I was like, "Who's Mark?" Because I had applied, maybe 3 months before that. And they're like, "Mark McCormick?" And I'm like, "I still don't know who Mark McCormick is." and I wasn't being like facetious about it or trying. I was almost nervous with the way they were asking the question. And they're like, "Eric, that's our CEO. He runs our organization." I was like, "Oh." And then they look at each other, and then they kind of like sigh at the same time, and they realize what had happened was, and they're telling me this as they're realizing it, that Mark reads all of his mail no matter who sends it to him. So I sent my resume to him in Cleveland, Ohio, where his office was. He opens it, probably looks at it, and is like, "Who the hell is this kid?" Inner offices it back to the HR department in New York. They open it, and they thought that I must have known him somehow, that it came from him. So they were honest with me, and they said, "Look, like, that's how you got in here, but hey, you've got 20 minutes to impress us, right?" So that ended up being like the start of my internship career, was working at IMG in their sponsorship group. Also, actually, you'd love this. It was also partially in their models division. So it was at the time when like Heidi Klum was coming up. So it wasn't necessarily a bad place to be for meeting some of the clientele coming in. And so yeah, in school, I did a number of internships. I worked for the New York Jets for one summer. I studied abroad in London and worked for the London Towers, which is a British basketball team. Whole nother story there, where one of their players didn't show up for a TV interview, and I had to pretend like I was a new recruit that they just brought on. And the interview was by a woman who was running this show that was kind of like a Maxim magazine show. So I had to like put her on my shoulders to dunk a basketball. And like her name was Michelle Claxton. I'll never forget if anyone Googles this. And they had the clack cam. The clack cam was basically just her face and like the upper half of her body as she's moving around on top of me with this basketball. So it was like totally like just, a show for men to watch to get, these thrills. It was just so weird to be, 19 years old, trying to do a professional job, and the GM of my team, like, just go out there and pretend like you're on the team. Here's a jersey. And then senior year of college, it's funny, I think this is a good lesson for anyone in terms of like showing up to any event you can and just, giving yourself a chance, shaking hands, taking business cards, whatever. So this will date me. It's my phone rings. What is it? Well, I got the first call from the NBA league office because I applied 4 places senior year. So I wanted to stay in New York. I applied NHL, MLB, NBA, and NFL. And I got 3 rejection letters right away. And then the NBA actually called me. This was October of my senior year. And in 2001, everyone's getting, especially from a business school, is getting all these 6-figure offers to go work for, financial firms and work in finance. And my parents were like, "What the hell are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I did all these internships in sports. I'm going to wait this out. I think I have a chance to get a position here." And they're like, "You have 1 interview with 1 organization. Like, good luck with that." So anyway, that leads to 8 phone interviews from October to March of my senior year. And the 8th phone interview, my phone rings. I remember it's kind of like how I am right now. I was a little bit, let's just say, tired from the night before. And it was the days of the answering machine. When I said I'm going to date myself, it wasn't the tape answering machine, but it was a digital answering machine where you could hear the person talk as opposed to it going directly to your phone. And I'm thinking my parents are calling me early in the morning. Why the hell are they calling me? And so I'm like hitting the answering machine with my pillow. And fortunately, I didn't knock it off because the guy on the other end of the line goes, "Hey, Eric, this is Mark Tatum with the NBA. Wanted to talk with you about an open position we had." So I like run to the phone, pick it up, and I'm like, "Mark, you were working for Major League Baseball 3 years ago. You gave a guest lecture of my intro to marketing class when I was a freshman. There's 500 people in the class. It was a class I never went to because it was at 9 in the morning, and I'm not an early morning person, but I came that time because you were presenting, and I was one of 3 names picked out of the hat to go have lunch with you at the Ivy Room after. And I was talking about the fact that I had IMG internship coming up the year after, or the summer after." And he's like, "Oh, Eric, I remember you." And to this day, I'm friendly with Mark. So he's now their deputy commissioner of the NBA. But the thing is, he still gives me shit saying that he remembers that meeting all the way back then. There's no way I believe that. So he was the first guy that I worked for. And he was running the global marketing partnerships group, which sounds like this intense, interesting, marketing and global job. But essentially, when you're in marketing partnerships, it means that you're the steward for the brands. So you're helping Nike and Sprite and Nestle incorporate their brands into the NBA products. And when you're low on the totem pole, the products that you're responsible for are things like Rhythm and Rims, the traveling touring vehicle that's basketball and music, and Jam Van, the youth interactive basketball amusement park that opens up into some kind of parking space in the middle of nowhere. And so it was a great experience. I learned from amazing people, but it wasn't necessarily met the passion of what I wanted to do in the world of sports. When you hear marketing, you think you're going to be making posters of Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, right? Like that's your idea of marketing. And now thinking back to the fact that like they actually interviewed me and still hired me even after having that view of what I might do, it's pretty interesting. But so David Stern was the commissioner at the time. Awesome guy. And it was before the days where they were really hiring a lot of former players to take on some of the executive roles. So I guess because I was tall, 6'4", I mean, I'm not basketball NBA size tall, but tall enough. He wanted someone who looked the style of a basketball player, but could explain the business side of the sport to the players themselves. Yeah. So someone who came with some credibility, but could explain the business side. And so he created this platform for me within the team marketing and business operations group. And the NBA was the first league to form a team marketing and business operations group, which was, think of it like the marketing think tank for the 30 NBA teams to help them share ideas. So what's working in Orlando with the Magic? Can we help take that idea and share it to Milwaukee because the market sizes are similar? Or can we change the idea slightly and bring it to LA for the Clippers or Lakers because it's worked in a smaller market? And so most of those ideas were ticket sales and sponsorship sales. Those are the 2 revenue sources for most teams outside of TV revenue. And so in this particular role, what Stern wanted was he wanted someone who would work with the players on understanding that interaction with your stakeholders, your season ticket holders and your corporate partners would mean greater relationships. And those greater relationships would mean more money being spent. More money being spent would mean greater, what they call basketball-related income, the overall pie of revenues that's coming in, and then that the players were tied to that basketball-related income because their salary cap was a percentage of that basketball-related income. So if the pie grows, their slice of the pie grows. And
incentive.
What's that?
Incentive.
Absolutely. And in fairness to these players, think about this era of when I was coming in. This was the Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett era when there was no one and done rule. So players were coming directly out of high school. So you had an 18-year-old, out of high school who didn't have a business background, didn't take business at all in college. And you're given, at the time, which was a lot of money, $3, $4, $5 million a year. Now that's chump change compared to what some of these guys are making, but you're given $3, $4, $5 million a year. And your thought process, because you're an 18-year-old kid, is, oh, this rich billionaire owner is giving me some of his money to play for his team, right? And so to help them take a step back from that and understand, no, this isn't the owners coming directly out of their pocket. This is coming from a pool of money that's generated from fans and corporate partners spending on the sport. And the more you engage with them, the more they enjoy the sport, the more they feel they're connected to the sport, the more that pie grows. And so, obviously based on the fact that, you've got players like LeBron making over 30 million a year right now, they've done a good job of growing that pot. The interesting thing about that position at the time was Stern was introducing the dress code at the time. So while my position was partially really interesting going and talking with the players, part of it was explaining to them why the dress code was being implemented at a time when, Rasheed Wallace is in the league and Allen Iverson's in the league, and the last thing they want to do is wear a suit and tie to a game. So I got some colorful language on my way out when I would leave after presenting that, and David, to his credit, when I would come back from those presentations, he would want to hear what the guy said.
Sure.
He said, "Don't sugarcoat it for me. I want to know what these guys think of me." And I was actually at David Stern's memorial service. I know we're not talking much about mental health. We're just talking about sports right now. But I was at his memorial service a couple months ago. He was the type of guy you'd never think would die just because he had this brilliant mind and felt like he would go on forever. And it was such an incredible tribute. They had Adam Silver, obviously the current commissioner who worked under him, speak, and Pat Riley and Magic Johnson. This guy, Rick Welts, who I worked for at the Suns, who was the president of the Suns, but had worked at the league office when David first started. And David's approachability and the way that he managed people, it was all about transparency and all about, like, if we're not honest and open with who we communicate with, we can't get anywhere. And what was shared in that memorial service by some of the presenters was something that David had shared with me in those one-on-one meetings, was that his father owned a deli in New York City, and he would work behind the counter and he would be serving people. And I think people think of NBA commissioner and they think he's making millions of dollars. He's, in the ivory tower. He's never had to work a day in his life. He worked his way up here, but how much manual labor has he done? And, he talks about the days of, like, getting up early in the morning at 5:30 and opening up the gate to the deli and serving customers, and customers not loving, like, the portion sizes and screaming at him. And, that's where he learned his humility. And I think that's what made people want to work hard for him, is that, he had such a big heart. He cared about people, but most importantly, he was really transparent in his leadership style, and that really went a long way. I'm happy to go. I'm happy to go on with where the story goes awry.
I mean, no, we'll get there. But I always have follow-ups because I never have a program. We just talk, and that's the way I do it, because it's real. And you never know what you're going to get. What's fascinating there is a young guy. I mean, two things stuck out. I mean, as an organization, he empowered you to essentially collaborate. So I'm a big collaborator with all the organizations to basically make it better. So when I'm talking about SEAL team or even to my sports teams, I'm like, guys, I mean, like, the group is so much more powerful than the one. We just got to get there. And, you have to be able to explain it, and you have to get buy-in. And there's that feedback loop that, you were the messenger carrying that out. But then at the same time, like, as I would say, Mr. Stern, was also listening to the feedback, and that's amazing. But it also explains, without knowing the inside, like the rest of us, why those times were hugely successful. And I have no idea, like, if the NBA says it's successful right now or not. But and the flip side is too, you're young, so you're, in a sense, I mean, he's a mentor, I would guess.
Yeah,
and you're learning leadership techniques, much like in SEAL team. I mean, we just have mentors. It's the way it is. And a lot of times you can see a young leader, and if they don't have a good mentor, you watch them work and you go, so who groomed that guy? And then you're like, oh God. But I mean, you know what I mean? So you saw some of these things.
His leadership, I mean, the stories that were shared in there, and I mentioned some of the people who spoke. So, this is stuff you'll find fascinating being a SEAL. So, they had a much smaller league office. So the way that he got his position, he was actually a lawyer from Proskauer Rose who was assigned to the NBA account that they were a partner of theirs,
Mm-hmm.
and then started working with Larry O'Brien, his predecessor, the commissioner there, and started to take on this role of VP of business operations for the league before he was ever voted in as commissioner when Larry O'Brien was going to retire. And there were two really interesting stories. So one was that before David was ever commissioner, Pat Riley, who's obviously, could be a hothead and
Right.
is LA Pat and, Showtime Lakers. So Riley gets up there and he says, I'll never forget this. My first year as a coach, and I could not believe the way that the officiating was in favor of the other team. There were so many more fouls called on us than the other team. And so I added it up that night, and I went to the press and I showed them, look how many more fouls we, the Lakers, were called on us versus the other team. And he said Stern flew on a plane that night, got to him the next morning with Larry O'Brien, but he said Stern ran the whole meeting. And he said he ripped into him like he's never been ripped into before. And he said, you publicly put the integrity of our league as if we would actually play favorites to one team on blast for everyone to hear. When you know damn well that even if the calls were uneven, there was no purpose in the calls being uneven. You're doing it for your own ego. And all that does to a league that's trying to establish credibility after all the problems we had in the 70s and the 80s with drug problems, et cetera. And now you're crashing down this credibility. You better, and like like Riley goes off on some of the colorful language that he used. But David had such a huge heart, but at the same time had a way to explain to people, to your point, that you're no bigger than this league by any means. This league is way bigger than you, and it's going to go on without you. Yeah. You better shut your mouth if you want this thing to grow. That was one thing. The other thing that Rick Welch said, the president of the Suns, he said, we're going to get questions from people about the past. The media is going to ask us about the past and things that happened. We are the ones who drive the narrative. So if we're the only ones being interviewed, and if our top players are the only ones being interviewed, and we talk about the vision of where we are going, even when they ask us about where we've been, right, we control the voice box of what gets out to the fans. Yeah. So it's on us. Let's not apologize for the past. Let's talk about where we're going in the future. And what a great leadership tool to learn from that, right? Like when you're trying to form an organization that there's a vision that people follow, to know that you don't have to get entangled in those questions about the past. Just go by them, say, acknowledge that they were asked, and say, this is where we're moving forward towards. And under his leadership, to your point, you could argue, in 2020, in Corona era, where is the NBA relative to other leagues? I think, they've done a really good job, but certainly where he took the league where it was from, sure, in the 60s, 70s to where it's gone to become the global sport that it was, to sit in Radio City Music Hall and have 4,000 people at your memorial service. Yeah. And the biggest names in the sport, like sitting next to, it was such a weird experience. Like sitting next to me is like Bob Ryan from the Boston Globe, and then Jackie McMullen on my other side, and then Marsalis, the jazz musician. Like all these different people in these different spheres that he had impacted. Is amazing the type of leader he was.
You just triggered something that's funny, and I'll hopefully not forget it. Come back to the Boston reporters. But what's cool is and I think that's what's neat, is you're giving insight to people that most people, like, again, put up in the ivory tower, or they're some superhero. And why I find this insightful, and this is for everybody, is they're people. What you're talking about is just people dynamics. It's collaboration across, multiple organizations for the greater good of a league. A leader who, when things get astray, goes and tells a subordinate, hey, look at the big picture, whatever the language is. And I find it funny because a lot of people, that's what I experienced in SEAL Team. Was I guess they thought we were robots, or that we can't die if we're shot. And I'm like, hey, we're just people, and we're a group, and we're really good at what we do. And the dynamic of which we do it is far from what you think. and it causes great things and it causes, haywire stuff. And so I think that has helped me in sports is, I start and have been introduced to guys, and then, some of them go on and play in the leagues. But what's funny is, like, to me, they're just people. I learned early that everybody is a person, comes from somewhere, has a background, good, bad, struggle, and that's their motivators. And then when you're in that bubble, in the big public eye, like, in a way, I'm like, geez, they have so many stressors I can't even think about. Like, who can I trust? Should I talk to this person? And obviously they're guarded for a reason. And what's neat is you're describing human dynamics in the NBA, which I think a lot of people would relate to, and it's real. And that's pretty cool. And what I was going to say about, I met Jackie McCallum, and tell me the white-haired guy again. I forgot his name.
Bob Ryan.
Yes, Bob Ryan. So I don't know why, but I was down in Miami at a training trip, and I was staying at Doral, and I guess the Celtics came in to play the Heat. Well, Nebraska, has had struggles in football, and obviously I'm a fan. But anyway, they were in the Big 12 championship, and this was when Ndamukong Suh was just dominating. So, I mean, yeah, so you're like in Miami country. And so I just go down to the bar down there to watch the game. And I like have to beg to get it on one screen, right? And the game, they're not scoring anything. Nobody's scoring. And the whole bar is like watching everything. Well, I'm watching this one screen, and I'm getting fired up because they might win the Big 12 championship against Texas, who I think was number one. And Sue's just throwing the quarterback around like a rag doll. And I'm getting pretty boisterous. Well, next thing I know, like, by the second half, these two people sit down next to me, and I kind of recognize them, but I can't quite place it. And then finally she's right next to me, and he's one over, and she like leans over and she goes, "You big Husker fan?" and I'm like so proud. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I went to Nebraska, blah, 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 blah." And so they ended up watching they were like, they wingman me for the second half, where essentially, Colt McCoy throws a ball out of bounds, and it's 0 on the clock when it hits. And they give them 1 second, and they kick the field goal and win the Big 12 championship. And so I'll never forget that. Like, it was just so funny. These Boston reporters who, I've seen on ESPN, and they were my swim buddies for the Big 12 championship. And they were like, "You got so screwed." Like that, look, I'm like, "Yeah, I know." It was 0 on the clock. The ball was still 10 feet in the air. Anyway. That's cool.
They are just people, though. I mean, like, it's fascinating. So two things come to mind when you say that. One is when you're in a room of 4,300 people, all of whom come from, let's call it like NBA elite stock, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's even more apparent how much people are just people, because it's no longer like what happened with you in the bar where it's Bob and Jackie. Oh my God, there are these,
right,
celebrities who are on TV. So I'm sitting next to them, and in that room, this is no disrespect to them by any means, but there are nobody in that room.
Right,
because
right.
Dirk Nowitzki's in that room, and all these big time players that have played in the past. Yao Ming's in that room, So like, it does show that everyone's just a person. And then you reminded me of a story that when I started working for Mark Tatum those first couple of years, even though Mark was the head of the global partnerships group, there were, let's say 8 different heads of groups from different departments, the head of global merchandising group and the head of the TV side. And so I remember one of the earlier meetings when Mark got called in to go meet with David Stern. And when he was done, because I had a friendly relationship, I was like, what was it like meeting with him? Is he really, this is before I ever got to know him. Is he a genius? Is he really smart? And Mark, interestingly enough, because we had no idea he would eventually become a deputy commissioner, right? Like, he was just one of the guys working as a director in the league at the time. And he said, he was really smart, but at the end of the day, like, I felt like I was hanging with him. He was just a guy,
Yeah.
He's a smart guy like anyone else. And that's something that stuck with me, because who would have thought that then Mark goes on to become deputy commissioner, right? Because he's basically, telling the future there, which is like, if you're a hard worker, if you're a smart person, if you're diligent, if you're good at what you do, there's a chance of you moving up. Now, Mark is one of the rare people, because he's actually like we could probably write a book about leadership and the narcissism that comes along with
Right.
leadership, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and why corporate America, there are more mental health issues in offices because of the
Yes.
narcissistic nature of who the leaders are. But Mark's not that type of guy, and Adam Silver's not that type of guy, and David wasn't that type of guy. And so the fortunate thing was I got to learn from leaders at the head of the organization at a time like when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
That was 3 months into my first job working there, and to see how they handled that situation. And even being involved, I'll talk about the rest of the jobs that I was in, from the team side of things, but watching the way that they handled the 2008 recession, right? And the subprime mortgage. And, the NBA wasn't doing so terribly then, but the thing was every other industry was tanking. And so the NBA had to do the fiscally responsible thing in terms of laying people off also, like everyone else was doing, and
Sure.
how they handled that situation, even to now with all that's going on with Corona and companies making decisions in terms of whether or not they're going to hold on to employees, furlough employees, make employees take pay cuts. I've seen some of the mistakes, and I'm not going to throw certain teams under the bus just because I don't think they made the right decisions early on.
Right.
Let's just call it that. Two things. I'm proud. One of the last team that I worked for, the Florida Panthers, and when you hear my story, you'll understand why this guy, Vinny Viola, who is an Army West Point grad, he was the first owner to announce that he's not laying off employees. He's not asking them to take cuts. So I was really proud of that he was someone that I worked for.
Yeah.
But the NBA, in being fiscally responsible, because they are certainly a progressive league, but they did it in a way to not hurt the people who would be hurt the most. They had their top level executives only take the 20% cut at the beginning. And from a mathematics standpoint, that's how it should be, right? I mean, like, in fairness, I'm not trying to preach like, Bernie Sanders type of,
Right.
of government right now or finances, but, there's a certain aspect of if a deputy commissioner or commissioner of a league is making millions of dollars, their 20% cut is going to help the company a lot more and not hurt the low-level $75,000, $100,000, $125,000 employee when their 20% gets cut. So they're really a great example of doing the right thing, especially from a PR perspective, when there's difficult decisions to be made and having other organizations follow them.
Yeah, but that's what I've found. I mean, that's what I guess I try to beat into people or show the human side, which is, it doesn't matter what it is, company, NBA, SEAL team, it's all people. So like, if we are the leaders, right, we're going to eat last because, I have men, I'm in charge. I have to take care of those people. There's an element of that. I have to take care of you and our family to be great at the organization. And so it's interesting that, that's not everybody in the military, but I mean, that certainly was part of our deal. Right. And when you get good mentors or you see what you saw early where, real people, go out and talk to them and be your real self, and we're all going to make it work. All of a sudden you look at things a little different. And for me, like, I just assumed when I kind of came back into the real world, like, oh, everybody successful does this. And then, like you said, I was like, oh my God, like, I can't believe this company makes money. And then look at all these problems, like you said, people killing themselves, with stress, anxiety, narcissism, gonorrhea. And so, hey, let's try to help, right, in whatever way we can. And then again, passion for the young people, because let's try to catch it on the front end and educate. And so, yeah, it's real similar, but it's at a big level. And what I've always said when people ask me, because I got, at that same time where I, met those guys, I was starting to come out and already talk about injury, mental health, and the importance of families for some of our foundations and SEAL team. And I laugh because people go, well, why did you do that? And I go, well, the truth is they all surrounded around golf, and I'm a golf junkie. And so I could golf and I could do the keynote speak, right? So, they would put together as their 501c event. And, some of those led to the PGA Tour. And so at that same time, I was starting to, see people that were on TV but get introduced to them to provide it. And I can never forget how some of the most nervous I've felt in my life has been going to represent the Navy and the service in front of a big audience, talking about the struggles and why it's important to think of people as a family unit, right? Not just me, the SEAL, but and supporting and yeah, I mean, I'm like, well, I prepare, I show up like I always would, and I would prepare because I didn't want to screw it up, and try to be respectful. Didn't matter if it was Jerry West out in LA. I was like, that's really cool. That's Jerry West. Wow, we're having a great conversation. You know what I mean? And what I realized quickly was, yeah, if you show up on time, you bring your best, and these are just people, and they talk, and you get to know them, and you realize, oh, they have the same stressors we all have. It can be highlighted in a different way. But the good ones are very people centric and look to take care of people, but they also, they have humility. You said it.
Well, the humility and I think vulnerability also, right? Like, so, I'm sure you probably read that study or at least heard of it, the Project Aristotle by Google.
Yeah, we teach it.
Okay. Yeah. So like, psychological safety, and I think in terms of team sports, like when I've read that project recap, and I think to like, okay, when I was playing sports and my coach would say, as the foreman in this position and playing basketball, your feet need to be as close to the baseline, the back of your heels as possible, in order for there to be an open lane for the three man to cut diagonally into the paint. And then if your man is guarding you as close to the baseline as you are, they're going to have a lane. If not, and the guy is helping off, you're going to be now open for that dish off where you can now go straight up to the basket. And while it's true that we could drill that over and over and over again, where my feet are as close to the line as possible, there's going to be a greater collaboration between me and that three man if we know each other on a personal and deeper level,
yes,
based on us sharing some of the vulnerabilities of what we've been through, than any amount of drills we could possibly go through in terms of just the X's and O's.
Yep.
And I think companies don't necessarily take that into consideration. They think we have a process. We make a certain number of calls. We log a certain number of opportunities. We mark them as won or closed or lost, and then we move on to the next one. We say, okay, but what does the person to the left and the person to the right feel about the person in between them, right? And are they having each other's back, and are they hearing each other on the phone and helping each other as different situations arise that might be similar to what situations were that they went through? Like that human capital piece in terms of the collaboration and the way that you feel towards one another. I think the highest performing teams, it's not just a matter of drilling them in terms of process. It's got to be drilling them with process along with connectivity based on vulnerability.
No, you just said it. Thank you. I mean, it's another validation for what I already know, because that's what SEAL team is. And then we've taken it and taught it to sports teams here with good success. Now, of course, sports teams have talent and all of that, but I always say to the guys, I say, do you not think that everybody else is lifting, doing the same amount of drills? I mean, at some point in time, all of that stuff, which you've worked hard to earn, is here, but now you're part of a group, and group dynamics and psychological safety being the number one thing that leads to vulnerability, that then, it's not magic of how you learn to read body language and sense things, but it takes work, right? And it comes from psychological safety. And it's so funny because one of the questions when we do an initial baseline is, I go through and we get all the sports stuff. And then I say something like, well, okay, you've got to be gone for the weekend, and you've got to have somebody, one of your teammates stay at your house with your girlfriend who you're engaged to. Who's that going to be? And I mean, and we go through some interesting conversations, and I'm like, okay, I go, what's interesting is, that's the 12th man on the team. Why is that not one of the top 7 that's out there playing with you? Right. And then they're like, wait, and I'm like, we can build towards it. I get it. Human dynamics, but you're absolutely right. And then we use Project Aristotle as a start point to talk about what Google and then some of the other things, but that's huge. And what's funny is that is exactly how SEAL team works. But it doesn't get out, and that's okay. Or it gets out in little ways. But it comes back to vulnerability and humility, and then just, accepting people for who they are and working together for that common goal. It's pretty fascinating stuff, but it's funny because locally here in Nebraska, obviously people love their sports. And so people are always asking, and reporters too. And I've just gotten to the point where I'm like, you know what, if you're not inside the group, it doesn't make any sense to you because you have to live it every day. And I said, this, even coaches, when they say, well, what exactly do you do and teach? And I go, here's the deal. Like, when you see a team or a group and we go, oh, that group or that team or that guy has the intangibles. I go, we all want it. We all see it. I go, and we know it when we see it, and we absolutely know when we don't see it. And I go, well, that's what we teach. We get teams to the intangibles, and it's not secret, but it's a much different path than drills and, oh, we didn't do well here, so we're going to go drill it even more. Right. Yep. And then if coaches who are addicted to success and players and even business owners, right, if they see it, I call it crack, because if it works, they adopt it. And that's the thing, is once they see a different way to what their end goal is, then they're all in. And I will say it is a little more difficult in the business sector when you're talking about people and culture and psychological safety, and if they're so bottom line focused. And that's one me right now at this point in my life, I can't resonate with them other than to say, well, higher retention, less turnover, less people sick, anxiety. And oh, by the way, production. Like my little small company cannot tell you, but I can tell you if people are in that space, they're more productive. I mean, you can come up with the metrics to measure that, but that's money.
It's absolutely money. But it's funny that you say bottom line, because if they actually studied the impact that those things had, they'd realize that you're not just making healthier employees, you're making more productive employees. Again, I know we haven't gotten my story, but with the first podcast I ever did after I got sick and I came out, my story was I won't say the name so people don't search it, but it was a guy in the sports industry, sports business side of things. And he asks me, how can we screen for people who might have mental health complications so we don't make a mistake in hiring them?
A bad investment.
He's asking a guy, and I go like this. I go, I didn't want to answer in like a, go F yourself type of way. So I answered in the most like facetious rhetorical way possible. I was like, well, if you don't want the accountants who look at every single decimal point to make sure that your numbers are perfectly on point when you're doing your books, and you don't want the marketing people who come up with the most creative ideas, and you don't want the PR folks who have the greatest drive to get the story out there, yeah, sure, we could screen for the people who have mental health complications. And it goes back to the beginning part of our conversation: is your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. Like, the people who are brilliant at what they do have an incredible skill set that most people don't have. They just need to learn to rein it in on the other side of those things, right?
Yes.
And so, I think companies are so risk averse. And then the other piece with companies in terms of, looking at this space, I won't mention again the name of the consulting company, but because we work with athletes and because some of them are high profile, we had a large consulting agency come to us and say, it almost was right in line with what you were just talking about, the measurement. They said, listen, this number of $3 billion in lost revenue based on stress around the U.S. on an annual basis gets thrown around all the time. We want to do a real study of the exact amount so that we can put an exact dollar figure to it. Obviously, there's going to be, some approximations in it, but it'll be a lot more exact than just that 3 billion figure. I was like, okay, sure. And they were going to use us just, from a platform perspective to help get it out. And that was fine. And then I got a call from their COO, probably about, I want to say 2 weeks before they were going to do all the work on it. Like, they were going to do all the measurements and getting the companies involved. Their board made a decision not to go through with it because they were afraid if they were the company behind the study, people would feel, their customers would feel, their prospects would feel that they had a mental illness issue internally with their company. And that's the reason why they took this project on. I mean, it's mind-boggling how backwards,
Right.
many companies are out there in thinking about this, instead of thinking about it in terms of human performance and giving people the best opportunity to succeed. The way that society has painted mental health, which we'll get into again later on, in terms of media, in terms of big pharma, in terms of all these messages out there, the thought process is you're either sick and you have this thing called mental illness, or you're healthy and you're fine, right? And it's one or the two, and you have to fall in one of those two buckets, right?
Right.
And it's amazing.
It is amazing. And that's why I'm looking at which is fascinating, just what you're talking about. I'm looking at your Same Here scale. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's simple. Right. And I always tell people, they're like, what's this magic Navy SEAL and high performance psychiatrist and Danny Woodhead as your former NFL guy? What do you do consulting with these sports teams and these businesses? And what are the metrics? And I go, well, we use we use a copyrighted proprietary, say it, Scotty, come on.
Proprietary.
Thank you. My God, having a mouth AD today. That thing. I think I always screw that word up. And I go, we sit down and we talk to people. And then, I go, it's really high speed. We talk to people, and it's as simple as kind of, where are you at on this? Are you thriving right now? Are you gliding? Are you struggling? Yep. And then from there, I mean, people can self-assess. And if they have psychological safety, they'll tell you, right? And you know right there, wow, if I have a person that's every day, like 90% thriving, they're more productive.
And when you, like, the simplicity of that scale, which hopefully people see when they take a look, is, first off, you'll appreciate this. There were 6 spots that we picked for that scale, purposely, not an odd number. Because if we pick 7, the most common conversation that happens across the world in every single language is 2 brick walls talking to each other. How are you doing? Good. How are you doing? Good or fine? And then it ends. So if we had a middle point on that scale, everyone would pick the middle point.
Middle point.
Right? So now the middle parts on those scales are veering a little bit towards doing a little better, or veering a little bit towards doing a little worse, and you could get a better sense for where someone is falling on there. So the beauty of something simplistic like that scale is you can talk about psychological safety. We're showing people you can all fall anywhere on that scale any given day, week, or month. So you're not a weirdo, you're not a sicko, you're not crazy, quote unquote. Right. If you're falling on the right part of that scale, that's just part of the human condition. And to your point, we can track based on psychological safety. If there's a student, let's say we're using this with a school, who's in the struggling category for 3-4 days in a row, well, we need to follow up on that and find out what's going on, right? Whereas before, what was happening in a class? A student was speaking up in class, as what a terrible thing for a student to do, right? I mean, I know I'm being facetious, but I'm doing it because I was the kid who, when you hear my story, like, I had shit going on when I was a kid. So I was probably talking up in class. But when you learn that what a behavior is a reaction to a feeling, and that feeling is a reaction to something that happened to you, what you realize is that any of us could be going through a behavior, but a teacher looks through that behavior and they think, Jimmy or Sally doesn't like me, the teacher. I'm going to sit them next to my desk and I'm going to penalize them because they're talking up. And that's not what's happening. What's happening is we need to find out what's going on in their life and why they're feeling that struggling feeling, so we can give them some kind of help, and they can get better and they can feel that safety and they can start to improve. But that communication barrier is just not, it's just up, and it's not able to be broken down by people without giving them tools to do so, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So,
well, hey, we've done a great job establishing some great stuff already, but I want you, if you have the time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Go back. Tell us your story, like where you started with this stuff and kind of, however you want to say it. Just, I mean, because obviously
please, I go, as you can tell, I can talk. So
yeah, me too. I mean, I'm having, as Scott knows, like I'm having to hold my hands down. I'm like, okay, God, I want to ask this question. But no, I love it because
when you're passionate about stuff, you want to keep sharing.
I used to get so mad at people because sometimes they'd say I look angry or whatever. I'm passionate. So I speak passionately, especially if it's a subject I care about or I know a lot about. And, but yeah, I mean, this, like mine, it started because of experiences as a youth. And, I didn't really even deal with them until 40. So, but anyway, it sounds like for you, it's the same.
Very, very similar in that respect. So, after the NBA, I took 4 other positions, and you're moving up the quote corporate ladder, right? So I was with a expansion WNBA team in Chicago. Then I went to the Phoenix Suns and oversaw their group sales staff. Went to the New Jersey Devils and oversaw their entire ticket sales staff. And then I get hired by the Florida Panthers down in Sunrise by that owner, who's the military background, Vinny Viola, to be their chief revenue officer. So the way that the hierarchy works in sports is there's a CEO, and you'll appreciate this. The guy that was hired as a CEO was Matt Caldwell, who's a West Point grad, who came from Goldman Sachs and had helped Vinny Viola with some of their personal investments. So he really trusted them as a CEO. So he hires Matt and I at a pretty young age to really restart this organization from scratch. Everything from hiring to culture development to all those things. And they had gutted out the whole business operations. And so 6 months into my tenure there, I'm loving the day to day, just like I had my previous 15 years in sports. There's certainly, the X and O's of things not always going great, but for the most part, I would say I'm coming in the office every day, loving what I'm doing. And at that 6-month mark, all of a sudden I start noticing I'm not interested in things outside of the office. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to go out with, girls. I don't want to go see my friends out after. I don't want to watch my teams on TV. I don't want to play in sports leagues. And I just want to come home and sleep. And you'll appreciate this being a hard charging guy. The ridiculousness was I justified that feeling in my head by saying, oh, this must be the world's way of telling me that I need to focus even more on work because I'm one step away from this dream position that I'm going to get. So I need to put my nose to the ground even more. Instead of staying at 12 at night, I got to stay till 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning.
As I like to say, hey, I'm 20 feet down in the hole. I need to keep digging faster. Digging faster. I'll get there.
And by the way, for everyone listening, this is no different when you call the isms. Workaholism is a disease. Like the same way that there's alcoholism, the same way that there's drug abuse, the same way that we get hooked on things. And those things, as I know you mentioned you have a history, and you'll hear my history from childhood in a second. We go towards things that we like doing. And yes, that's productive, but there's a certain point where it's not productive, where to your point of continuing to dig the hole, all we're doing is avoiding dealing with the stuff that lies beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's the dark side.
Yes, exactly. So, all right. So I start feeling I'm losing all this interesting things. I wake up one day and it's like pushing myself out of bed out of quicksand. And my I don't know if my charger here is beeping. So if I lose you, I might have to go back on the regular.
Oh, we can all go get some coffee and reconvene if you're good with that.
All right. So I wake up this one morning in Florida after that 2-week period, and I'm like pushing myself out of the bed. I remember walking and it felt like I had cinder blocks on my feet. And I go to the closet, I look in the closet, and I'm sure many of your friends and yourself, you've been through these things. Like you look at the closet and it looks like, Grand Central Station. Like you can't make out what one shirt is versus one pair of pants. The last thing on my mind was, oh, you're supposed to shower before you put clothes on. Like my whole process of my day was gone. Like I had no ability to tap into this routine that was normally mine. And I somehow find a way to put a shirt on, put pants on. I probably wasn't matching very well. And I get into the office, and it felt almost like this force field. Like we talk about the term agoraphobia of not wanting to leave your house. It was almost the opposite for me. Like there was this force field pushing me out from not going to the office, but I kind of, grunted and made my way into the office. And another reference to some older guys like us, older, is I'm looking at my computer screen and it looks like light brights. If you remember that game from back in the day. So nothing's registering in terms of what's showing up on the screen. It just looks like these speckles. And I remember looking out at my staff, we're like 60 people on the staff right now. And everyone's looking like they're doing something important. And I can't process anything. Like I can't look at someone and say, is this person making this call or having this conversation with this person people are coming to the office. Eric, we have a meeting. Can you come and talk? Can you address this group? That we have a new prospect coming in. Can you talk to them? And I'm making excuses and I'm saying, listen, I've got another conference call. You got to give me a couple of minutes. And I'm just biding my time to try and get through the day. I drive. I never took lunch. But this day, I get in my car and I figure, okay, what's acceptable for lunch? It looks like people take an hour. I drive in my car 20 minutes. I did the calculations so that I would have the exact time. I drive 20 minutes to an open parking lot. I put my seat down so that I can try and fall asleep for 20 minutes. And I'm literally there sweating, thinking, please let me just wake up after a 20-minute nap and everything be back to normal. And then I'll have 20 minutes to go back in the office and I'll be fine. And this whole nightmare will be over. And obviously, as you could probably imagine, that did not happen. So I come back to the office, and that night we had a game. And so what we used to do is we would have the reps invite prospects to the games, and then I would address them in a suite between the first and second period, or the second and the third period. And so, you give an impassioned speech when you have prospects there, and that's even something now, 5 years removed. I can tell you the things that I would say when a prospect group would come. It would be things like, we have a great new ownership group in place. It just purchased the team. That's excited to spend money on the team and bring. Our GM just brought in Barkov and just had a #1 draft pick, and moving in the right direction. And Luongo's still our goalie. And so you have all the talking points down, but forget about talking points. You're speaking from the heart, right? These prospects are coming in, and I'm like shaking. And I go to my office and I write down on an index card, "Hi, my name is Eric Kussin. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of the Florida Panthers. It's nice to meet you." And I can't think of anything else beyond that. And I read that in front of them. I can't even say that without reading it. And so Matt, the guy who was our CEO, I just said, "This is Matt Caldwell, our president. He'll now address you." And I just walk out of the suite. And, Matt, being a military guy, he wasn't like, "Oh, that's really messed up that you did that," or he was going to have my back. So I found my way to my office. The rest of the game goes on. And then I find Vinny, the owner, and Matt afterwards. And I go up to him and I say, "Guys, like, something's going on here. I don't know if I have a brain tumor, or this is a traumatic brain injury from back in the day from playing sports, or I had a hemorrhage or something. Like, I can't think straight. I can't put a sentence together." And I'm explaining to you a lot more fluidly than I was explaining to them. It probably came out like gibberish.
Yeah.
And Vinny looked at me in the eyes. You'll appreciate this again as a military person, because it's not something I've ever heard, but it's awesome to hear this from a military guy. He said, "Eric, we never leave a soldier out on the battlefield. So take as much time as you need." And he said, whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, get yourself well, come back and hit the ground running. Right. I don't know if you want to comment on that part from a military perspective.
No, but I mean, it's not just the military, but it's how I am. People first. Like, I don't care what business you're in, they're your best commodity, period. End of story. And you've got to hopefully recognize things and allow them to deal with them. Of course, there's always time to cut bait, but given what you're describing, yes. Like, and how can we help?
Which, unfortunately, though, many organizations would not give that type of leeway, especially from an ownership perspective.
That's the 10% of good right there. That is not the common answer.
Exactly.
It drives me nuts.
But what you'll appreciate is, none of us grew up in the era when they were teaching mental health in school. So where do we get our mental health education? I joke about it now, but we got it from commercials, because we're one of 2 countries in the entire world where big pharma is able to promote directly to consumer. So when I heard 3 months, right, up to 3 months, and your identity, just like your identity was a SEAL, my identity was a sports executive, I'm thinking I have 3 months to get back to being the person that I'm supposed to be, right? And so I think to those commercials that I've seen, and the commercials are a cartoon character with a sad face and a gray cloud above them for 15 seconds with sad music. And then all of a sudden, beautiful music comes on, the person smiling and dancing, exactly, blue sky, birds are chirping, and everything's great. So now take that on the context of what we've learned as kids growing up, which is, I have strep throat, I have bronchitis, I have pneumonia, I take this magic pill called an antibiotic. And by the way, it does work. I sleep for 2 days and I feel better. So if you're going to be given this thing called an antidepressant, which sounds a little bit like antibiotic, if you're not that in the know, it's an it's working against whatever's negative in your body, right? That's the way that you think of it. Okay, this thing's going to work for me, right?
Yeah.
And so my thought was, I watched those commercials. It says it could take 4 to 6 weeks to find out if one of them works. So my thought is, look, this guy's giving me 3 months. As messed up as I am right now, I'll take one pill, see if it works. If it doesn't, I'll take another. I've failed Zithromax before when I've taken antibiotics and gone on Levaquin instead. I'll probably fail one of these, antidepressants. Then I'll take another one and I'll be fine. So I go home to New York, and at 6'4", 240, I go to my parents' house where I had my twin bed that I grew up in, and I lay on that bed. And the next 2.5 years, I lay horizontal, staring at the ceiling for 99% of the time. I'll tell you what the other 1% was, but 99% of the time, I don't watch TV. I don't listen to the radio. I'm barely answering my friends' text messages other than just to say that I'm alive, because there is zero processing going on in my brain. I literally wake up just staring at the ceiling, looking at paint chips, and that's it, like a vegetable. And the first doctor that I went to see, he had me fill out one of those charts where from 1 to 5, describe how accurate this feeling is. I feel awful, whatever. So I'm filling this chart out, and this, not a very cheap doctor to go to either. And I go in his office, and he spends 15 minutes, like, instead of having the old Scantron things that we used to have back in the day, just running it through and being like, here's your score. He's just adding it up for 15 minutes as I'm waiting for him to say something. And he's like, Eric, he's like, you have a shitload of anxiety on top of a shitload of depression. You need heavy artillery to knock this out of you. And that was, again, all I knew from was medication. So I left my first appointment with 5 prescriptions. Okay. So like your standard SSRI drug, your booster to the SSRI drug, your benzodiazepine, your off-label, dementia drug that is supposed to work also on the SSRI to make it work better. Like, he just tries to dope me up. And that 2.5 year period, when I say that I spent 99% of the time in the bed, the other 1% was literally being handheld, walked out to a car to drive to a new doctor who was going to try a new set of psychotropic drugs on me. So in total, during that 2.5 years, I tried over 50 different combinations. Finally, I meet a doctor. Believe me, it doesn't get better, but at least there's a change now. I meet a doctor who says, you've tried a lot of psychotropics. You need to do TMS therapy right now, okay? And I know in the military, especially in San Diego, because I have friends who've been treated out there, there's some great things with TMS. So this is nothing against TMS that I'm saying right now, other than to tell people out there, different things work for different people, right? So I'm doing the TMS therapy. They're shooting the electromagnetic waves in my brain, trying to wake up the neurons, get them firing. And 23 days in, I can't fall asleep that night. And I call the doctor the next day, and he's like, look, you could take a day off. You'll come in the next day, just try and fall asleep tonight. So I try and fall asleep the next night, don't fall asleep 2 nights in a row. So that next morning, after 2 nights of not sleeping, this was the first time I had ever developed the concept of a suicidal ideation. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at this bottle of pills on my counter, and the bottle of pills, it like my mind is speaking to me saying, swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle. And after I'm done, we could certainly have a deep conversation about suicidal ideations. I think that they're error messages, the same way that we're wired for survival of the fittest, we're wired for food, shelter, water, etc. I think when stress and trauma builds to a certain level, these thoughts that we have in our brain, like when we drive over a bridge and we think, what happens if my car goes over the side, or a train goes by, and we think our leg might, if we stick our leg out, what happens? Will we be spun around, or will our leg actually get torn off? Those thoughts get stuck in our brain, and it's like we have to accomplish that thing. It's like a magnetic pull to do this, or you're not this thing called satisfied, like you are when you wake up with a dry mouth and you have to take a drink. It's like your brain is telling you, do this, do this, do this, do this right now. So I knew I couldn't stop that feeling, and being around my parents at the time, which I know not everyone has the fortune of being, I yelled out to them, and I was like, you guys got to take me to the hospital. Like, something's wrong here. And so I check into what's supposed to be the top facility in the Northeast, Cornell Med in New York City. I get, put into the ER of the psych ward. Awful experience with the residents there. They're like, what do you feel? I was like, I feel nothing. My brain just feels empty. And like, I can't think of anything. And the residents are looking at me like, we've never heard that before. Like, it was amazing to me. Like and again, this is supposed to be the top facility. And I'm not trying to throw Cornell under the bus. I'm sure it was like the level of expertise of just these residents kind of not hearing these severe of cases. But like, I would, if you sat me staring at that wall, and literally just, left me there, I would stay and stare at that wall all day. Like there was nothing going on in my brain. So they transfer me to the Westchester facility, and here's where it really gets interesting. I see who's supposed to be the top doctor in their facility there, and she looks at my chart the first day and she says, "Wow, Eric, you've tried everything there is." She goes, "Your last resort is to do shock therapy." Now, when you hear that phrase, right?
Yeah.
Most people hear that, they're like, shock therapy. And I'm like, no. I'm like, that's not what scared me. I was like, hearing last resort is what scared me. Like, no patient, no matter what you're going through, should ever fucking hear the term last resort from a doctor. Like you and I and Scott would eat dirt for 10 days. If there was minerals in that dirt that got us better, we would eat that. So, I do the shock therapy because I have no choice in the matter. They're basically telling me this is my last chance of getting better. And they do 12 sessions over the course of 5 weeks, electrodes on the brain, putting you under general anesthesia, shocking your brain into seizures. You wake up, you have no idea where the hell you are for an hour. At least that's the way that my brain processed it. It doesn't even bother me that much that I went through ECT. That's not a big part of the story. But what happened was I leave the hospital after 5 weeks and I'm no better than I was the previous 2.5 years. And so I'm thinking, after this doctor's told me this is my last resort, that unless Pfizer or Merck in the next 3, 4, 5 years, as I lay in bed and waste away, invents some major miracle pill that hasn't worked for me, but now will work for me because they have some new combination, that I'm going to be like this vegetable the rest of my life. And so my parents are both former educators. My father was a principal. My mother was a language teacher. And so they go to these continuing education courses, and they're all excited to tell me they're going to this course called Integrative Breathing Practices. I'm like, go have fun. Like, I have no idea what the hell that means. I don't know what integrative is, and I've never done a breathing practice in my life. So they go, and they come back, and my mom's all excited. She's like, I met this woman. She was the teacher. She helps people who have physical health complications with pain management and mental health complications. You got to meet her. She's great. Okay. And every doctor I've been told has been great up until this point. So I'm not getting my hopes up. So I sit down on her couch 3 days later, and she's the first doctor that I meet with who, instead of her first question being, Eric, what are your symptoms? And then here's how we can help you with those symptoms, her first question was, Eric, tell me about your life. And not in like a Freudian talk therapy type of way. She wasn't like, tell me about your relationship with your grandparents. Let's dive deep.
Right.
It was like, just tell me about your life. So the fascinating thing is, again, you talk about that you have childhood experiences. I didn't even know where to begin because I didn't know from what adverse childhood experiences are, right? So I'm like, in the middle of 3 boys, we're a sports crazy family. I played sports growing up. My brother played sports growing up. We all watched.
You gave her the boilerplate speech.
What's that?
You gave her the boilerplate speech.
Yeah, the boilerplate. Like, where do you want me to start? Like, this is like I'm an everyday person. But herein lies the interesting thing of me thinking myself as an everyday person. She's like, okay, you have an older brother. Let's start with him. Tell me about your older brother. So, my earliest memories go back to like 8, 9 years old. I'm sure there's ones before then, but okay. So from the time I was 9 years old, my older brother, 4 years older than me, he broke his femur bone in a sporting accident and was in a body cast for a year at homeschool. Okay. Big deal. A lot of people get into accidents. A month after he heals from that, he's diagnosed with ALL, a children's form of leukemia.
Ooh.
Goes, 5 years of chemo and radiation. Cause back then, the chemo drugs weren't what they are right now. They had to zap your whole body to try and get rid of the cancerous cells, and they're breaking everything in your body down, and it takes much longer to do it. But miraculously, I'm knocking on wood, he comes out of it into remission, right? And a month later, He's driving to a hockey game with his friends. If you remember the old school Jeep Wranglers that had no top whatsoever, no seatbelts in the back. His friend is his permit, first time he's ever driving, taking them to an Islander game, swerving the car back and forth because that's what kids do when they have a new car and a new toy. My brother flies out of the back of the Jeep, lands on his head, cracks his head open, loses partial vision in his eye, is in ICU for a month. Heals from that, goes to college. He went to Cornell as well. Junior year of college, he's feeling a pain in his knee, gets it checked out by the sports medicine folks. There's nothing structurally wrong, so they take blood tests. Well, his ALL, the children's form of leukemia, has come back now. So it's been a good gap, a good amount of time, almost a decade since he had it. And so now they have to give him much stronger chemo drugs. And the chemo drugs have gotten better over the course of that decade, and they're more targeted. And so they're really zapping the shit out of him to really try and get it out of him. And he goes through this treatment, and his body just starts breaking down. He starts developing temperature, and about 2 months into the treatment, he develops 105 fever, and my parents drive him into the hospital, and his body's gone into septic shock. So now his organs are attacking themselves. His body goes into a coma from the septic shock. And for 3 months, he's laying in that coma with a tube breathing for him. My parents were basically living at the hospital at the Ronald McDonald's house, just coming back and forth, staying with him. I'm up at college at this point, and now I'm driving back from college every 3 days to make sure he's, still alive. The neurologist can't tell us what the hell's going on in his head and if he's just going to be laying there the rest of his life. So we're taking a chance keeping him alive for those 3 months. But miraculously, again, he wakes and he's got his full faculties about him. He's joking about the Jeffersons on TV in his hospital room when he wakes up. And the rigor of the septic shock, unfortunately, wore down his kidneys. So he goes into kidney failure and he has to go on dialysis. Goes on dialysis. We all get tested to see who's the closest match. My father goes under the knife with him at the same time, donates a kidney. Everything's fine. And I'm thinking, okay, finally, after this, the 20 years of hell, like we're finally out of this difficult period. And a month later, over the course of that next year, after that month passes, 3 of my close friends in their 20s all pass away from heart conditions unexpectedly. So I'm telling this woman this story, and her jaw is dropped on the floor, and she's like,
yeah, because that's what we call traumatic experiences.
Dude, exactly. But I didn't know from trauma, right? So it's fascinating the way this conversation, she goes, Eric, what else happened to you as a child that you want to tell me about? And I go, my answer was, again, I'm using the term facetious a lot, but I said, my answer was facetious. I go, what do you mean what I've been through? My brother's been through a lot. My friends have been through a lot. Their family, like I haven't gone through anything. And she just puts her hand on her head like this. And she's like, okay. She's like, I'm going to have to explain this to you. She's like, Eric, first of all, you have PTSD. And again, going back to that, we never had education. The one thing we learned in school was that PTSD is for servicemen and women. Right?
Yeah, John Rambo.
Like, I've never been in the service. Like, so how do I have PTSD? And she goes, okay. She goes, I treat people who were in 9/11, who had friends who jumped from the building in 9/11, women who've been in the sex slave trade, people who've lived through natural disasters and watched their friends die in those natural disasters. They saw one major traumatic event and it shocked their system, the trauma. You've seen many traumatic events over a long period of time. I have no idea how the hell you're 35 years old and just coming to me now. You must have been able to cope through these jobs that you had and enjoying what you did, back to workaholism, right?
Right.
That you push these things to the side and somehow were able to get through this. But here's the analogy she gave, and hopefully this helps your listeners. She says, let's say you're a sports executive and you have a front row seat to basketball games the entire year. Well, you're watching one of the basketball games and these 6'7", 7-foot guys are running up and down the court and they're sweating, because that's what happens when basketball players play. And the sweat is hitting you because you're in the front row seat. Well, what do you do at the end of the game? You go home and your shirt is a little bit wet from the sweat. You take it off, you shower, and you go to work the next day. You sat front row instead of a basketball game for like a wrestling match that was a muddy wrestling match, and every move that your brother made to try to survive was like making a wrestling move, and every move that your friends made to try to survive was like a wrestling move. And because it was this muddy pit that they were wrestling in, this mud kept hitting your body, hitting your face, hitting your brain, hitting your body, hitting all of it. And what happens when mud hits you? It cakes up on you. and it stays there and it dries. And you never took a proverbial shower and washed that mud off, meaning not that you didn't actually take a shower, but you never did anything to rid yourself of all of the effects of you watching all those events from a front row seat. So
not only that, feeling it. I mean, because you watch it has an effect, and you feel it whether you know it or not.
Yeah, and she, you know, what she says to me is, "Did you not care about your brother? Did you not love your brother? Did you not love your friends?" Like, of course these things are going to impact you. How did you think these things didn't impact you? And I said, because we didn't learn about mental health. Like, I learned, you know, the cliches. You talk about working with sports teams. Coaches say, forget the last play and move on to the next one. Or your teacher says, time is the greatest healer. Both of those are the biggest bullshit lines that there could possibly be, because they're this stuff that accumulates and builds inside of us that if we don't deal with it, takes us down, right? But I didn't know that. So I stop her for a second and I go, okay, Don, I go, no disrespect to you, but forget about my situation for a second. If you're saying watching other people go through stuff can impact your mental health, then forget about my story with my brother for a second. Watching parents go through fights, watching parents go through divorce, watching your brother go through verbal abuse, hearing about your friend being sexually abused, hearing about your friend in the schoolyard being bullied or watching them being bullied, seeing them being cyberbullied online with the new shit that's going on with technology, watching a family member get sick and have a terminal illness, watching a family member at a young age pass away. It's like, there's not a person in this world who hasn't been through one or some of those things. If what you're telling me is those things affect mental health, that means everyone's mental health is affected, and everyone has some form of, you could call it PTSD, I'll call it messed up life experiences, whatever we want to decide the name is, there's not a person in this world who doesn't have it. And so she kind of just smiles at me, an older woman with this like sage type of smile, and she's like, Eric, I'm an integrative practitioner. Like, I believe in the mind-body connection. I believe all these things we experience impact us. You're preaching to the choir right now. The thing is, our society doesn't look at things that way. You're interesting that you're bringing this up as the first time I'm ever telling you about what stress and trauma are. You're thinking about other people. She's like, that's great that you are, but let's get you healthy first. So she's like, I have to help you get to a better place because you're not in a good place right now. So she's like, take a leap of faith with me. I want you to go to this weekend breathing course for 3 days. 7 hours a day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which when you're agoraphobic and you're feeling like shit, hearing about 3 days seems like an impossibility. But I said, all right, I'll oblige you. I'll go to this breathing course. So, you know, being a basketball player, I show up to this course and I'm in a cut sleeve basketball t-shirt and basketball shorts. It's in an old karate studio being run by this nonprofit organization called The Art of Living. And there's 8 other people in the class. I'm the only man, only one under 40 at the time, only one born in this country. So it's me and 8 Indian women and 9 yoga mats, okay? And I look around and I'm like, I am a fish out of water. What the hell am I doing? But, you know, the stuff that I'm sure you talk about all the time because of how you healed and got better, and the stuff that you're taught, that your guests talk about all the time, I learned in that class. You know, I'm a science geek. I love learning about how the body works and why things function. And I learned basically about the vagus nerve, and I learned about this large nerve that goes through our neck. And it makes sense to me that now this isn't what they said, this is my own research afterwards, but hey, when we were cavemen and a woolly mammoth came to our fire pit and tried to attack us, we're going to breathe differently based on that animal coming at us. We're either going to try and fight it, we're going to try and run away from it, you know? But because of that, if we're breathing differently, it makes sense that there's almost, you know, a thermometer, barometer in our neck that's telling the rest of our body, you need to act differently right now because some stimulus is coming your way that is going to fuck shit up right now, right? And so the way that I explain it to people is, let's pretend we were all sitting in the same room and a car crashed through our wall. All of us would make this sound, and we'd be shocked and we'd stop breathing properly for a second. Well, all those examples that I gave Donna, where if your parent is terminally ill, you're not breathing properly because you're bracing for the worst all the time. If your child is being bullied in school, you're bracing for, is my child going to self-harm? Am I going to hear some tragic story at work one day? If you're going into work every day and your boss is verbally abusive, you're going to not be breathing properly because you're going to be waiting for that verbal abuse to be coming your way. And so I was able to accept that not breathing properly is a way that my system got affected, because if I was hearing that the next shoe was always going to drop, with my brother getting sick all those times and my friends passing away, then what I was doing was I was wiring my body through my incorrect breathing, basically to tell my system, you don't have the energy, effort, ability, concentration to focus on anything else other than bracing for that woolly mammoth coming. That's the only thing that you could be prepared for. So I do this breathing practice for three days. I don't feel any better. I'm definitely the most messed up in the class. The rest of the women who are there, you know, they described it as going from seeing life in standard definition back to high definition. And I'm like, I want to go from seeing nothing on my TV to seeing static. I'll be happy. So I do the practice at home. We're on a text message thread, and I do the practice at home. They want us to do it for 40 days, and we check in with them that we're doing it for 45 minutes for 40 days. Well, the 30th day, this is where the story starts to turn. I wake up and I look at the TV and I'm like, holy shit, I want to turn the TV on. I want to know what's on TV right now. And I'm like, my stomach is growling. I want scrambled eggs for breakfast instead of pancakes. Like, two things that we take for granted that all of us feel every single day when we're, quote, normal. But for me, since I hadn't felt either of those things for 2.5 years, they felt like miracles. So all of a sudden, I'm like walking around my house being like, oh my God, like, oh wait, I want to pick up that weight and use it. And so I'm starting not to feel myself, but at least feel functional, right?
Feel something, right? You're just feeling something.
I'm feeling something. And what I described to people when I said I was feeling something, as sports guys, you can appreciate this. I said, feeling that something felt like watching my team in the game 7 of a playoff series, where every single thing that happened is heightened and you're taking in every single moment because you're like, I haven't felt this in so long. This feels so incredible. And so the time period that I'm talking about is middle of 2017 that I start to feel a little bit better. And so this is right before Kevin Love's come out with his story. DeMar DeRozan's come out with his story. So I have zero template for how I'm going to share with people what the hell I've been through, because we'll get into this in a little bit when we talk about the way that the media talks about mental health. The only stories I had read about mental health were Meta World Peace shared that he, you know, went to a psychiatrist. He's fucking crazy for sharing that he went to a psychiatrist when he won the title. Like, no one was sharing long diatribes about what they'd been through. So I write on a Word document, because I'm not a very big technology guy, like we were just talking about. And I write this thing out, and my friends read it, and they say it takes 35 minutes to read. And my friends are digital marketers, and they're like, dude, no one's reading something in 2017. It takes 35 minutes to read. Now, I had LinkedIn and Facebook. I didn't have Instagram. I didn't have Twitter. Now, I was like, all right, well, you know what? I'll put my telephone number on the top. So if people don't read it, they'll just see that the subject is mental health. It was at the time when LinkedIn didn't have character limits. So I just posted the whole friggin' thing and I put it up there. So the next morning I wake up, and that same friend who told me not to post it, he's like, dude, he's like, your story's gone viral. And I was like, oh shit, does that mean I have to take it down? And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? I was like, viral, like they're getting viruses when they're downloading it? He goes, you dumbass. He goes, people don't download like from your computer the file. He's like, it lives in the cloud. They're just, and I didn't even know what the hell the cloud was. Like, viral means that people are reading it. It's like, okay, awesome. So 3 days go by, it gets read 150,000 times. But the bigger thing was in 2 days, I get over 400 calls. I'm erasing my voicemail box because these people are just calling me from as far as China, leaving me messages saying, things sound familiar to what you went through. I want to talk to you. I want to see if there's a way that I could find out how you started to get better. So I start calling all these people back, and this is the first impetus for starting an organization. Aside from the comment to Donna of like, everyone's going through something, I start to hear these stories from people, and it might sound like hyperbole. You know, I definitely didn't get back to all 400 people because some people didn't pick up the phone or whatever it was, but a good chunk of them I got back to. There wasn't a single mention on any of these calls of disorder. So no one was saying, Eric, I have PTSD also. No one was saying, Eric, I have bipolar. Instead of PTSD, it looks like this. Instead, they were sharing a story of challenge that they had been through, or challenges, plural, and then symptoms that they were feeling that sounded similar to mine. So the spectrum was everything from as traumatic as it can get, right? This family called me up, husband and wife and said, we lost a child to SID, sudden infant death syndrome, and we've never been the same since 5 years ago. It's been awful, right? Okay, you understand how that's trauma. But back to this thing that we were talking about earlier about how people obsess and think about things. I had this woman, 32 years old, call me, and she says, Eric, I've been married for 7 years, 2 beautiful kids. My wife is my husband is as handsome as they come. We have white picket fence, beautiful house, all the money we could want. I wake up every morning for the last 10 years from the time I was 22 years old with a pit in my stomach because I broke up with my 4-year college boyfriend, and I wonder whether or not he was the right person I should have been with, right?
Yeah.
This is someone who's admitting to me that they love the husband that they're with, this handsome guy who's brought them 2 beautiful kids, but their mind can't get over, and they're obsessing over this person that they broke up with when they were 22 years old. And it's at that point I realized stress and trauma are things that happen to us in life, but they're also things that we do to ourselves in terms of situational things that have happened where we obsess over them. We don't let them get out of our system. We don't give our system a break. We don't release and rewire it out of us, and it builds inside of us, whether it's something major like the loss of a child or something that we just think about over and over and over again. And so knowing that, I'm like, okay, there's got to be a reason why someone who goes to the gym to work out my physical body for sports, yet I never knew to work on my mental health. Why did the message not get through to me if this stress and trauma thing is so common? Why did these 400 people who call me, Joe Schmo, who wrote a story that they don't know, and not call the friggin', doctor in their town or a psychologist or some therapist at their school? Like, the message isn't getting through the right way. We need to change whatever messages it's out there. But let me wait. Let me give the benefit of the doubt. I'll go to the largest nonprofits and government agencies in our country, and I'll see what their messages are. And because I have sports contacts and people in the entertainment industry, if there's someone out there who's getting the right message out there, I'll just give whatever contacts I have to them, and they can amplify their message. It's not about me. I want to just help people. And to your point, which we'll get into in a little bit, the only way we get over this is by holding hands and everyone working together. There's not going to be one savior to this, right? I really want to dive into that topic in a little bit because there's too many people who have a God complex in this space who think they're the savior of the world. And because they told their story, now all of a sudden everyone's going to get better. That's a whole side note. Okay. So I go to these major websites, and I'm going to name them. And this has nothing to do with what they do as organizations. They are amazing organizations that have the right ideology in terms of helping people. They want to see people get better. They put funding towards the right people, but their messaging is so backwards and so wrong. Okay, so here's what I mean. I go to NAMI, Bring Change to Mind, Mental Health America, JED Foundation, Active Minds, all these large, and by the way, this is not something I haven't said publicly before, so I'm not doing this to throw anyone under the bus, and I'm very public with what our messaging is. I go to these websites and I see the same 3 themes on all of these websites, okay? And all 3 themes, at least in my mind, as a person who's been in sports marketing my whole life, are moving us further away from healing as a society, more so than they are bringing us together and making us understand this thing. And now I'm starting to get the picture of why I didn't know to get help, why these 400 people didn't know to get help, and probably why the majority of our society doesn't know to get help. So the first thing is, every single one of them has the stat on the top of their page, 1 in 5 people are mentally ill. Okay, what are we telling the rest of the world if 1 in 5 people are mentally ill? Yes, 48, let's call it, million people in America have mental illness. Okay, that's a large number. A hell of a lot larger number is 280 million people and 80% of our population. And if we're not putting a, quote, label on those people, what their opinion is that they're okay, normal, healthy, and fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They don't have to worry about things. But how much does that fly in the face of all this stuff that we just spoke about all of us going through stuff, right? So you have all these people facing these challenges, yet you aren't born with this thing called bipolar, where you have this thing that's been told to us, it's this chemical imbalance. Therefore, this isn't a topic for you. Don't worry about it, right? So that was problem number 1. Theme problem number 2 was all the campaigns were copies of each other, right? So Nike has Just Do It as their campaign when I'm talking about campaigns. So every campaign is an action word followed by stigma. So stop the stigma, erase the stigma. If you peel back the layers of an organization is run by people. An organization is not an entity that's just an entity. So you have a group of people, let's use NAMI as an example, who they are saying we protect people with mental illness. They're a National Alliance on Mental Illness. And their tagline is stop the stigma. So what are they basically saying to the community of people out there? Hey, you people who are doing this action word called stigmatizing, forming opinions, judgments, making decisions about this other group of people, you need to stop doing this, right? Let's get away from the bullshit that stop stigma means that we're all going to come together and stop doing this. No, that's not what it means. What it means is there's a group of people who are being, made fun of and poked fun at, and you guys need to stop doing that. Well, I've never seen a social campaign in my 40 years where you pit two groups of people against one another, and that brings us all together in a symbiotic way. And now everyone's rah-rah and we're working together, right? So it's doing the exact opposite of what we want to do. And I think to like when my brother had cancer, the campaign that took everyone away from thinking cancer as the big C and took away people from thinking of cancer as if I touch that person with cancer, I might get cancer myself, was the campaign was everybody knows somebody.
That's
affected,
it.
right?
That's
Because
this
it put
edition of the
everyone
Dark
on
Side
same
of
playing
Elite,
field. It could be
powered
my
by
cousin, it could be
Performance
my
Mountain.
neighbor, it could be my
Stay
aunt,
classy,
uncle,
Nebraska.
but we
Stay
all
calm,
have some.
America.
And now look at where cancer's gone. We now have full stadiums of people who hold up signs saying, I fight for, and everyone's accepting that. Well, we're nowhere near that with mental health. And in fact, not only in mental health is it everyone knows someone affected, it's everyone is someone affected, and we're still not even that close, right? Okay, so that's the second thing. Now, the third thing is, and you're going to laugh your ass off at this, the organizations, they didn't have endorsers. Like the biggest names they were able to get were like Wayne Brady and people like that, right? So when they would see the paparazzi get the lead on a story of Britney Spears coming out of a mental institute or Lindsay Lohan coming out of an institute, the People magazine or Us Weekly would share a story and be like, Britney Spears has depression, but she shaves her head, right? Or Lindsay Lohan has anxiety, but she dresses with lipstick all over her face because she can't put it on correctly. Or Charlie Sheen has addiction and he can't leave his house unless he coaxes himself up to get himself enough energy to leave the house, right? So the nonprofits are cheering and saying, look, there's celebrities who have these mental illnesses. It's not just everyday people, but the examples that are being given are these erratic, far end of the spectrum, crazy behavior stories. And you're like, how is anyone going to be able to relate to that? Like the symptoms that I knew were difficulty getting out of bed, having brain fog, not being able to put a sentence together, not feeling emotions towards my family. I'm not hearing any of those things. I'm hearing about heads being shaved. And even, when Kevin Love shared his story, I go around, I talk to colleges right now. I don't know what feedback you get, but, here's the example of what I'm talking about, that no one person's going to save the world. Kevin shared his story in the middle of November. Well, look how many athletes have shared since. Kevin was a great player for UCLA and for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's kind of been like an player for Cleveland. No disrespect, but that's what happens at the end of your career.
Yeah.
So I asked college students, hey, what do you know about Kevin Love? Oh, that's the guy who had a panic attack and ran off the basketball court in the middle of the game. That's what they know about him.
Yeah.
Again, they know about the erratic behavior. So my thought was, we got to create a brand that speaks to mental health on a continuum, everyone being in this group together. It might be at different levels. Disorder might be a part of it, but it's only a part of it, and it's not the entire continuum. And if we can all say, not that we all have mental illness, but that we've all faced challenges, and those challenges have all impacted all of our mental health. How apropos right now with Corona going on, that people are realizing that this is the case, that when you deal with stress and you deal with the trauma of events, your mental health is impacted, no matter what your background is, no matter how much money you make, right? That's the message we need to get across. And so that was where the umbrella name of the organization, were all a little crazy in quotes. A upside down was born. And I got a little, pushback from people who, again, these nonprofits, I won't mention the names, but some people who said, you can't use crazy in the name of a nonprofit, that's triggering. And I said, crazy is used to mean 15 different things in our language. I might say to you, hey, Jack, like, this sandwich tastes crazy good. Isn't our world crazy right now? Like, you're acting a little crazy right now. In none of those cases am I saying you're acting mentally ill or the world is mentally ill. I'm saying crazy like it's a little off. Things don't feel right now, right? And there's not a person in this earth who can't say that about themselves. We all have idiosyncrasies. We've all dealt with shit that we've gone through growing up, and parents giving us little quirks about ourselves and stuff like that. So that was the name starting off. And then I started reaching out to these athletes that some of them I had relationships with, some of them I didn't. Theo Fleury was the first guy that I reached out to.
I saw you have a good staple of people. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's back to the whole, not one person is saving the world thing. You look at some of the bigger names who are on our alliance, like a Dwight Gooden, from our era is like a god to us, or right now a popular player like Robin Lerner, who I mentioned before. There are names on there that when you look at, you might say, wow, that's glaring that person is sticking out, that person's not there. The one thing I can say to that is, again, without sharing, who any one person is, I can't get every single person in the world to check their ego and be like, yeah, let's work on this together. My plea to everyone when I talk to them is, Prince Harry shared his story multiple years ago, talked about the fact that he went to therapy, talked about the fact that it was losing his mother, something that is common to so many people in this world, grief and loss. And yet the UK is still at a 30-year high in suicides. So if Prince Harry, who is by far a bigger celebrity in the UK than any one of our sports stars or our movie stars or anyone is here in the US, and that's no disrespect to them, that's just reality of how many people follow a royal, if he can't make an impact by himself, why do we have people here in the US who think their brand alone is going to change things, right? So my rallying cry to all these people that we work with from an alliance standpoint was, keep your message of what your individual message is. I don't want you to go away from that. Theo Fleury, your message is the Breaking Free Foundation because you broke free from sexual abuse and trauma. But let's roll up into a collective message, our message being Same Here, our campaign in American Sign Language sign that you see people all on the site making, Same Here being two words that are simple that you can make with a hand sign that crosses all language barriers, geographic barriers, socioeconomic barriers, basically saying, hey, Jack, hey, Scott, I go through challenges, you go through challenges. If we all go through challenges, that's part of the human condition. There should be no shame in us sharing that. That's just what our story is. Why are we holding back there? And then what that communicates is that 5 and 5 of us face this, not 1 and 5. And that now creates the real starting point that we need to get to for mental health. And I know I've spoken forever, so
I love it.
I'll end on this and we can go into programming and stuff like that. But all these campaigns that are out there, I'll use the one that's most popular in Canada, right? Bell's Let's Talk, okay? Clearly started by a phone company, Bell's, and having people talk is a good thing, okay? In their mind, you get people to talk on the phone. But if the backdrop of talk and talk mental health or hashtag talk or whatever these talk things are, is the belief that only 1 in 5 people are sick, then what we're telling people on that day, that week, that month of that campaign is that this is that day, that week, or that month where we need those people. Sorry if I just cut out there for a second. This is that day, that week, or that month where we need people to open up, and those people alone should be allowed to talk without us forming judgments and opinions about them. That's not the case. The case is we need everyone talking all the time to normalize this conversation, to show that we all go through shit. So I get frustrated when I see these campaigns and everyone's like, this is so great, they're taking on such a viral nature. And I'm like, all we're doing is reinforcing the same negativity that exists out there, which is that it's the sick people and the healthy people.
Right. No, so, there's so much there. I wonder if, well, I have my own theories, but it's all awesome. One, everybody, it's called the human condition, right? Yep. Because I was like you, I kind of thought like, oh, there's something wrong with me, I'm broke, and even other people and all these things. Every human being, regardless of race, religion, or anything, deals with issues of the human condition, right? Yep. At all levels, and it can change, it can go back and forth, whatever, sliding scale. With regard to PTSD, this is what I'll say. The military, and again, marketing, everything, you're right. Like, that's, everybody thinks, number one, everybody that's not in the military thinks everybody in the military has PTSD. Not true.
Yep.
From a pure numbers standpoint, pure numbers in this world, in our country, America, the military by far doesn't have the largest amount of numbers, right? But yet everybody, goes, oh, well, that's something the military guys have. So as a former military guy who, yes, I've seen a lot of that. I've had some of it myself, but it manifests itself different in different people, even if we were in the same experience. My goal is, sure, to talk about it from that perspective, but it's also to say every single person can have this. And if we want to talk numbers, there's first responders, there's doctors, there's kids that have a brother that's sick that get PTSD, right? It's not a dirty term. It's a challenge. And everything, when we come together, as you said, when we look at just how humans can help other humans and then add in professionals that have studied their craft, listen, when you can diagnose what it is, we always have a good chance together to solve it. And so what I really love that you're bringing out, and there's a part of it that, yes, you have to get people that have power that people resonate with. And that's where, I knew, being a former SEAL and seeing some of my brothers and what they're doing, there's a continuum. And I was like, well, if I'm going to have a platform, I'm going to talk about the real successes and failures I've had and how I've overcome them. And I'm going to go find other people, because obviously I'm around sports too as well. And frankly, I didn't realize, even though I was in the thick of it with the military, it wasn't until I really got to know young athletes and kind of watch them grow that I couldn't believe how much of the hurdles and challenges are in their lives per capita, because they're going to work really hard to that 22, 23, and they're driven, but the dream is not going to work out for the majority of them. And they're ill prepared sometimes at 22 and 3 to step into the quote unquote real world. And I was like, wow, we've got to educate you guys. And then I go to business leaders and I'm like, holy cow. So you're totally onto something, which is, it is a collective. No one person has the right answers. The stories can empower and show you, oh, wow, and kind of help you. But unfortunately, when we think categories, and I don't even mental illness is true. My personal Jack opinion is, okay, that's a term for the doctors and the people. I get that.
Right.
It's mental challenges. Like, we all have them. And yes, they're on a scale. And we have to be cognizant. And what we don't do, and what we teach now, and what I learned in SEAL Team, and even though we didn't know the science behind it, is that's what we worked on in SEAL Team the most, was the mental health, the mental resiliency. Yeah, we did all the physical stuff. And again, I said, people were always put first. So we led from a people first category. And it's amazing because somehow we've moved in general society. And I guess what pissed me off the most, and the reason, I don't say came out, but I'm open about a subject that, maybe a lot of guys from my background wouldn't talk about. And while it's gaining a lot of traction, we know more about, as America has shifted, transgender issues, all these issues, which are all good issues, right? Because we're educating people. Okay, so there's so many things we know about, and yet we don't know about mental health because it's not represented out there, and to prepare for it. So we don't teach kids. I mean, we're doing a better job, but we don't teach kids. Like you said, you're either, you have a cloud over your head, or you're the happy Tweety bird. And there's this continuum. And so while it's getting better, I believe the awareness one, which wherever it comes from, it's like with these platforms, we can get out there and we can tell our stories, and you can have professionals. But my biggest, I guess, life goal now is to make it commonplace like everything else. Do you know what I mean? Because that's half
if
the
you look
problem.
if you look at the mission on the top of our website underneath, same here.
Normalize.
It's about normalizing. People say, that's why I so go against Stop the Stigma campaigns, because it's not about stopping the stigma. It's about normalizing the conversation and making it part of our everyday conversation, that we all talk about it. Because if you walk down the street and you tripped and you fell, funny enough, you'd probably be clumsy that you did that, right? Like, your friends could make fun of you that you did that, but yet you'd come out with a cast, you'd be walking around with your crutches, and people would be like, oh, tough guy, even though he clumsily fell, tough guy. If something got handed to you in life, just like you fell and that got handed to you on the street, and that thing impacted this brain-body connection, it's, oh, they need to go speak to someone about that. You know, I'm sorry they're not strong enough to handle that in their life. Like, you friggin' kidding me? Like, I would, back to strength of things, I'm sure you would agree with this. Like, I would take 10 broken legs over one more day of being in the hell that I felt for that 2.5 years and what that felt like, right? The hell that your brain can put you through when you are in emotional pain and suffering is far surpasses any physical pain I've ever been through in my life. And so for the people who fought through that, you know, it's cliche, like, because people speak in Twitter terms now and they put it in a certain number of characters. I don't even remember what the number is, 240 or 480 or some shit like that. You have to put the soundbite out there, and so people say it's strong, not weak, to talk about stuff, right? Okay, but let's get into the weeds of why it's strong to talk about it, why it's strong to have gone through it. We need people who are willing to open up and share the actual story of how friggin' miserable it is, so that people know why you're strong to talk about it. And by the way, the greatest superpower we all gain by going through this thing is perspective. I'm convinced perspective is the human superpower that everyone has the ability to gain, because when you've been in a place before and now you're out of that place and you're able to look back on it, everything else is a joke by comparison. So like, if I have to go and give a speech in front of 3,000 people at a college, people will come up to me like 5 minutes before the speech and be like, are you nervous? It's 3,000 people. I was like, this is a freaking joke compared to what I did laying in that bed by myself. Like, yes, 3,000 people might seem intimidating, but it's nothing compared to that, right? So it's interesting you say with awareness, and I'll go back to some of the earlier stuff with, the sad thing to me is, because of the way in which some are using this space, because it's a bubble, because there's more buzz around it to get their brand out there. Again, not using names, an artist who comes out and says, not I have, but I am bipolar, and because I'm bipolar, my next album is going to be hot, right? What's happening is we're further, like, people think that that's a good thing, that more celebrities are coming out and saying they have a disorder. It's not. It's only a good thing when a celebrity comes out and says, here's what happened to me, here's what I went through with my life, and here's how similar it is to what everyday people face. Because if all we have is celebrities coming out with disorder labels, then guess what? We're reinforcing the same bullshit that's been around for the last 50 years, where people think it's either the sick or the healthy. And they're saying, oh, those are some of the early people who are willing to be open about their sickness, as opposed to, so those are the early strong people who are willing to share that we all go through shit like everybody else.
And that's the thing too, is it should be, you know, Jack's opinion, but it's, here's what I went through, here's where I was struggling, here's what I did to get help or whoever helped me, and here's how I live now, right? And that's unfortunate, because like in any space, people are going to abuse things for that quick fix, you know. Just, it's like I say with SEAL Team, like, there are guys that are going to abuse the thing they did in the past to make a quick buck or whatever, and it's very self-serving. And this is no different. However, I think that as people like you, people like me, the people that have gone through it and are saying, no, here's the way to look at it. And again, go back to vulnerability. And when you do live through it, you gain perception, which leads to compassion and empathy when you see somebody else or hear a story. Or in your case, I don't know about you, but I would say, well, just like with you, I'm like, damn, I had it easy. Right? I mean, it doesn't mean I discount what I've gone through, because I mean, I still want to live a long time. I could go through some more stuff, but it gives you perspective, and you can understand it instead of camps and, you know, where we're sick. And it really is funny because, you know, in my SEAL career, obviously I didn't want to admit anything because I feared for my job. And frankly, I forged medical paperwork so that I could get into the job. I would pay for those later. But in the end of the day, like, that probably wasn't the most healthy, right decision, but it's because of the stigma. And it was because of this thing like, oh, well, if you've seen a psychiatrist and been on an antidepressant, you can't be in the Navy. What? Well, I mean, kind of upfront, that's what it says sometimes, right? And
Yep.
it's like,
Yep.
why? Well, why? I'm highly successful. And that's why I always tell people, by all walks of measurement, I'm a highly successful human being with a family and all of this. And that's great. But that's not me, meaning there's so much more. And I deal with this stuff like you've dealt with it. I continue to share it. And that's the only way I know to move it into everybody deals with this. Let's work on it together. Because the funny thing is, if you're a leader of people, like you've led people, or you see people, somebody falls down, breaks their leg, you're like you said, you're like, oh damn, go get a splint on it, get it casted up, you'll be good to go. I mean, if you have the same type of mental health issue, that's not the gut reaction of most people. They almost immediately go like, what's wrong with that guy, gal? What they're weak, all these things. And sometimes even with drug addiction and alcohol addiction, you get the same thing. And sometimes, people need more work to get straight. Other people, a little work. And it's like, guys, it's just, we got to get that whole piece out of there. And, unfortunately, the way America is, though, you do have to have a level of people with some global following. But you said it well, if Prince Harry can't start it to, have a huge impact, well, always it's the collective in things like this. And it's changing the perception. And there is some movement. I see, my kids have lived through it with me personally. And so they talk about it, meaning it's not a scary subject to them. And I also tell them like, yeah, if you feel like you need to talk about daddy's bad night or, hey, I lived it. If you happen to have kids over and it slips out, that's okay. That's life. Like, when they go like, well, your daddy was in the war. Yeah, he was in the war. Oh, we had this bad night in Croatia. It's okay to talk about it. Like you don't have to hide it, because I've always said my struggle started way back with my mother and an abusive father, because here in little Nebraska, you don't talk about those things.
You don't talk about
That's hidden stuff, right? It's all hidden. That's so wrong. And again, one by one group, wow. I mean, I would have not thought until I met you. While I pay attention and I've talked to people, farmers with issues, obviously military, we see it in sports, but a global mental health movement of awareness to change the perception and normalize, as you say, that's where we've got to get. And because the help's out there, even if we didn't have professional doctors, the power of just you and me talking, right? And sharing ideas, like, because what's funny is I could have said, hey man, when we get all freaked out and stressed and we think we're going to die, you know what we do? We breathe,
right.
Because they knew about the vagus nerve, and we teach it to athletes now. And it's so funny, right? They look at us like, you want me to breathe? I'm like, yes, I want you to start mastering your breathing practice so that you can trust it under high stress. And they're like, well, I don't know if it's going to work. And I go, well, if it works when people are shooting at you, I think it's going to work for you on the basketball court, my man. God,
that's awesome.
Your story is amazing. And not only that, but what you've started. I mean, then after, and then few more minutes, I just burning up the airways. You got to get lunch. I'm like you. I'll forget to eat when I'm talking. I don't know if you do that, but
same way.
But so as you're coming out of it, and then you're seeing all of this, then that starts clicking that, hey, I've got to do something, right? I've got to change the narrative.
Look, people might think like, why did you tackle such a large version of this? Why did you just help people with PTSD? Why don't you just help sports executives? Like that's the area you came from. It's because the way in which I experienced learning about it by being fucked up the way that I was, and how wrong it was being communicated. That's the reason why I had to look at it this way, is because, I realized there's so many areas of society that need changing, right? And so I knew if I was going to create something and I was just niche in my approach, I wouldn't be able to have the impact that I could have by thinking of this in a more global sense of how many people are affected. Like if I'm talking about that everyone's affected, but I'm just talking to sports executives, I'm not walking what I talk, right? And so like, even though you see probably more athletes in our alliance than you do musicians or actors, that's only because the lowest hanging fruit for me was that's who I had relationships with, right?
Sure.
And it's growing from there. Like Ben Affleck and the movie The Way Back, you know, they reached out from Warner Brothers and we did a whole singled out as having PTSD by themselves. Our first year event that we did, I invited military to come to the event, and I brought them up on stage with 10 everyday people who've been through stuff themselves. And I said to the audience, we had 400 people there, I raised all of our hands and I said, this is the face of mental health, showing military together along with everyday people, because that to me is what we need to get to. We need to get to this point where people don't see it as, well, the military people have the PTSD. And by the way, you know what doesn't help things either? This might be controversial to say this, but like when military members are sat alone together in a crowd at a baseball game, I actually think that moves us further away, because I understand what the baseball team's trying to do. And I've talked with all my friends in sports about this. Like, they're trying to show that they acknowledge this group and they donated this group of tickets. You know what would be a hell of a lot more impactful is if you see the military men wearing the white uniform and the white hat, and in between each one, it's literally every other seat, there's an everyday person sitting next to them, and you're showing this collaboration of all of them being together. That's a hell of a lot stronger message than just the military by themselves.
Crew, just remember, choices have consequences. At Performance Mountain, we've worked our entire lives to be elite in every sector. Now we try to give back. At Performance Mountain, we empower teams and groups to maximize potential, minimize friction points between groups of people, communicate at the speed of trust, and optimize performance when it matters most. Check us out at performancemountain.com.